Good morning. My name is John Roy, and I'm joined this morning by Dr. Brittany Rogers, who is a psychiatrist here in Greenville. And we're going to be talking about mental health because this is going to be airing during the month of June, which here at Pelham Road Baptist Church is when we celebrate Mental Health Awareness Month. All right. So, Brittany, before we even ask your question, tell the folks a little bit about your history.
Sure. So I am from South Carolina. I went to college in Charleston. I went to medical school in Columbia, South Carolina. And then for training after medical school, where you really get more intensive training in your specialty, I went to UNC Chapel Hill in North Carolina. Okay. And then came back after graduation from fellowship, where I completed a general psychiatry residency and a child and adolescent psychiatry fellowship. Came to Greenville to start private practice.
Now, in your private practice, do you see children and adolescents only?
I see a mix, which is a nice option to have being in private practice. But I do tend to see a younger population. So children, teenagers, and adults. And some of that is younger adults.
Okay. Well, if you joined us last week, you heard from Dr. Joe Mason. And me and her talked about anxiety, and we thought that the two leading things that folks always deal with are anxiety and depression. So you drew the short straw. You get depression. All right. So let me just ask you the first question. What are some of the causes of depression?
So we understand that that's a harder question to answer than we might guess.
All right.
So we know that, like many medical illnesses, high blood pressure, hypertension, diabetes, that there's not just one cause, that it is heritable. So we see depression run in families.
Okay.
There's something about our genetics.
All right.
We can't quite isolate that to just one gene, for instance, because it is complicated. And we also know that while someone might have a predisposition genetically to depression, that what we go through in life also can impact that.
Right.
So going through a tough time, going through stress really impacts all of us in our mental health and physical health.
You know, as you were saying that, you know, in my field, I was thinking about people in the Bible that strike me as a little depressed. I mean, Saul, we know, was sort of depressed, but even prophets like Elijah strike me as having some depressive tendencies. So if I hear you correctly, it could be very well genetics, family to family, but it also could be that sometimes life just sends you some really difficult situations and some bad things to have to endure, and that can be very depressing. All right?
Absolutely.
So what are some of the first signs or earliest signs of depression? How would I know that I'm getting a little depressed?
So that can actually depend on your age. So for most of us, especially adults, that could come with sadness. It can also come with things like apathy. So I just don't care about things. I'm not as interested, motivated. I'm no longer very much motivated to interact with people. So I'm withdrawn. I'm staying to myself more. Maybe I don't have the energy to get up, to go outside, to do the things that I normally do, or they just don't feel as enjoyable. So sadness, crying, being more tearful, having more negative thoughts about myself, about the world, not engaging in things that I usually do. Those can be very, very common signs, and usually what distinguishes depression from other things are how persistent those are.
Okay.
And I would contrast that with younger ages. So children and teenagers in depression could not have the sadness aspect. So they may not feel sad at all. It may be primarily apathy, lack of caring, or anger.
All right.
So that can sometimes surprise parents to hear.
That is, well, it's somewhat surprising, but living with a kindergarten teacher, sometimes children act out in very destructive and angry ways. And what they're really dealing with is possibly, not always, but possibly depression, right?
Absolutely.
So you kind of hinted at it there, but how can we distinguish between the blues and depression. And I'll give you sort of a lead in with this story. My mother, her birthday is June 17th, which is typically always near Father's Day. And I find myself most every year, she passed about 11 years ago, I find myself getting a little sad during that period of time. And at first I didn't know exactly why, but after a couple of years of going through it, I just kind of thought, I wonder if just remembering my mother is bringing me to this point. Now, it was always something that was fleeting, it was never permanent, and it never lingered into July, but for a week or so, I would just be in a funk, I guess. So, but anyway, tell us, how can we distinguish between having something like the blues and depression?
That's a great question. And I think it's on everyone's mind as we're experiencing different things in life.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you shared really illustrates part of what is different. So the fact that this is fleeting and you start to feel more like yourself is key.
Okay.
I think so. Not only is how long am I feeling down in a funk, not myself, it matters. I think also the intensity. So if I'm feeling sad because there is maybe an anniversary of sorts that has me missing someone, going through sadness, thinking about loss, and it's not as intense or not as long lasting, then that, I think, leads us to feel like, okay, well, I know why this happened. It didn't hit me out of nowhere.
Right.
The other thing is, if you're still able to enjoy your home life, enjoying activities, being as social as usual, then sadness exists because that's a human emotion, but it's not impacting how well you're functioning at work or at home or your relationships.
Okay.
So I think that's a big thing to try to distinguish. How much is this impacting me in my quality of life, in what I'm doing?
Because if it is impacting you, then you are depressed. That's more than the blues. It's keeping you away from social functions that you would go to, or you find yourself having to just check out of work early every day because you just can't take it anymore. All right.
Absolutely. So depression, as compared to sadness or the blues, would typically come with, again, everybody experiences somewhat different symptoms, but it can include sadness, low energy, low motivation, problems with sleeping too little or too much, still feeling fatigued, sometimes changes with appetite, with eating, being more withdrawn, not enjoying myself, not wanting to do my hobbies, having more negative thoughts about myself, about the world. And then for some people that ends up feeling, negatively about life, or having thoughts of, I don't want to be alive.
Yeah. Okay. Brittany, if we find ourselves depressed, we need to call a doctor. We cannot self-diagnose. We cannot fix ourselves. We need to call a physician. Yet, there are practices that help us maintain, I guess. What are some of those things that we could do?
Absolutely. So I think that's helpful to remember that mental health is health, that just like high blood pressure, diabetes, depression is a treatable illness, but it also means getting some help. That's not something that I can will myself out of, because no one would will themselves into depression. No one wants to feel this way. So the things that we can think about that could accompany treatment and evaluation with a physician would be some other healthy practices. So I always talk with folks about time outside. So in some ways, we're like plants. We are more likely to thrive in sunshine, in the outdoors, as compared to in bed all day.
Okay.
There's a strategy called behavioral activation, and sort of the really simplified version of that is, if I am too tired, not motivated to get out of bed, and I'm just sort of thinking about the day. Maybe I'm dreading the day, or I'm thinking, why can't I just get up? What's wrong with me? I have all of this time to be, circling around these negative thoughts, and that's not going to help my motivation to get out of bed. It's not going to help my mood or my thoughts about myself, and it's not going to help me feel more energized. So thinking about not dwelling in that, trying to, if I find that I'm up for the day, then trying to go ahead and get out of bed and move forward so I'm not feeling stuck in this cycle.
Okay.
We also know through research that there are some benefits to healthy lifestyle choices as well. So physical movement, exercise, it doesn't have to be running a marathon. It can be going on a walk outside. It could be going on a walk inside the house if it's rainy or really cold. But moving our bodies is helpful.
Okay.
Being social is helpful. So when we feel isolated, trying to fight against the urge to not talk to anybody at all. So we are social creatures. So trying to make sure that we're reaching out to other people, even if it's not, I don't want to talk about what I'm going through. Well, let's talk about something. Let's, connect with another human.
Well, so the first step is, if we're depressed, call your doctor. Okay? That's the best step, and the first step you can take is to call your doctor and be honest with your doctor. I mean, I think a lot of us play down our mental health. We come up with a lot of excuses for our mental health, but we should just be honest. Doc, I don't have any motivation. It's not sadness. I know what sadness is. This isn't sadness. I'm having some really bad thoughts. I can't get my mind to get in gear. Can't do more than an hour or 2 hours of work. So, and then talk to them. But after that, what I heard was get outside and be active. And there are a lot of smart ways you can do things, and be social as well. I mean, one of the things about congregational life to me is when I don't see someone for several weeks, it's not so much that I miss them in the sense that, well, where are they at? It's like I realize how important friends and being with people are. And so I feel like something must have happened. Something, and maybe it's depression, that is keeping them away because they don't want to come and interact with people. But, if you got a grandchild, well, you could actually see the grandchild in the house. That's right. You could put them down in front of the TV. Or you could walk outside with them with a ball, and you would be in the sunshine, and you would be getting a little exercise, pitching that ball back and forth to them or rolling it back and forth to them. Plus you're creating a memory, because no child ever remembers sitting and watching TV with grandma, but they do remember grandma teaching them to throw a ball. So, all right. Let's talk for a moment about men, aging men, and depression. In my travels, that seems to be a growing epidemic. Why do you think that is, and I know they should call their doctor and go to the doctor, but what's going on?
Yeah, I think that in some ways is really related to what we were just talking about, connectedness. And there are a lot of theories about different milestones in our lives. So, when a child is learning to walk or learning independence, assertiveness, the terrible twos or toilet training, we know that there are these different milestones. And as we age, some of those milestones change. So we're thinking about retirement. And I think at an older age, we're more likely to look back at our lives and analyze. How do I feel like I've done? And for many adults, retirement can be very enjoyable. It can be a great time to connect more with family, to do the things that we haven't had as much time to do before retirement. But I think it also is associated with some of the challenges for aging people, including men, where we've worked really hard at a career throughout life, maybe not been as social with neighbors or not established as many friend relationships outside of work. So then at the point of retirement, we don't have as many social connections.
When we walk out of work, we walk away from all the friends.
Absolutely. And so I think it really does become more challenging when if someone's feeling isolated and they don't have those connections, or maybe the sense of purpose. Like retirement can be a wonderful thing that people look forward to, but there can also be a sense of, what do I do now?
Right.
So thinking about, making sure that we're not feeling isolated. If we're having friends with coworkers and then those relationships don't exist after retirement, then thinking about, okay, what am I interested in that I could meet other people? What are some hobbies that I could try? And And not necessarily in just one example, but I often tell people sometimes we have to fake it till we make it, right? So if I don't know what to do, I can try out a few different things. And it's okay if that doesn't end up being the ultimately best hobby for me. It's okay to try different things out, but to try not to get stuck in that.
Okay. Practical side of this, I think, and it's another story of mine, is that I'm by nature an introvert, and I had a hard time making friends as an adolescent. And so you think that's a memory you have. And I've had a career that has been one where I've had to make a lot of friends, and I've had to be an instigator of a lot of conversations. So in my mind, I think I can't get rid of that adolescent boy that had trouble making friends. And so I'm a little tempted as I've aged to be standoffish and to not have any friendships and just think, well, friends are kind of like my music. I got them all in the 70s. I don't need any more. But I picked up a hobby a couple of years ago, and I've learned something new in this hobby of playing pickleball. I've learned that I can make new friends. People that I have never known before, that if we share a common interest, and if we do it a few times together, it won't be long before we're having lunch together, drinking coffee together, going out with our wives together. And these are people who are not from my normal walk of life. But it all started because, you just kind of got out there, tried something, tried a hobby, and also got rid of those old tapes that said, well, you're too old to make new friends. So, and that takes a little work, a little mental work. Well, is there anything as we wrap up that you think you need to cover and say as a parting word to folks who may be struggling with some depression?
Absolutely. So I think one of the things that I would really encourage folks, because I do think it comes up often as a psychiatrist, is that we don't have to compare our suffering to others. Okay. So someone doesn't need to be bad off enough to reach out to their doctor.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We don't have to be suffering with the most severe depression to be able to try to be honest. Or even say, you know what, I'm not sure if this is different than sadness, but these are the things I'm feeling. Because ultimately, we don't need to diagnose ourselves. That's right. Why we're going to a physician. So getting input, being honest, just like you said, trying to be transparent with what's going on, and just saying, like, if I don't know something, then, okay, this is sort of what I'm thinking, or this is what I'm struggling with, or I wonder what's going on or how to understand this. And I think sometimes we can look at the world around us and say, well, my troubles aren't that bad, which may be true, but it still doesn't mean that our struggles are irrelevant.
That's right. And kind of the way I think about this is with my physical health. And I think this is translatable to both kinds of health. If I woke up with a crick in my neck, well, I know what a crick in the neck is, and I just go about my day. But if I woke up the next day with a crick in my neck, then I would think something was going on. And so I would call my family care doctor and get an appointment. And there's nothing wrong with that. So when you find yourself depressed, and that, this is something I need some help with, then just be honest with your doctor. Call them, make an appointment, tell them the truth. That's what I hear you saying, or I hope that's what we're communicating to everybody, is that your doctor is your friend, and physical health and mental health are both health. And so we need to have some practices that are good for mental health, but we need to go to our physician when we need to, because they're there to help us. Well, Brittany, thank you for coming. And y'all practice good mental health. And if you have any questions, don't ask me, but when you see Brittany in church, you ask her. All right? Thank you for joining us.